YouTube. Thank you for tuning into my channel. This is Azrael, and in this video we are going to be talking about the claims of Mithras and Jesus. Okay, every year you're going to hear, oh, Jesus is Horus, Jesus is Mithras, a couple of other claims that Jesus is compatible, or shall I say, a carbon copy of other gods. At most, Jesus is was inspired by various gods. Now, that does not mean that he is a carbon copy. A good example of an inspirational story was Jesus turning water into wine. Matter of fact, this was technically his first miracle. The god Dionysus turned water to wine. He's the god of wine. Okay, you have a Roman religion, a Roman god. You have a Romanized version of a Jewish religion, and you have a god turning water to wine. This is probably inspired by Dionysus, because this story existed beforehand. However, Jesus is not a carbon copy of Dionysus. The proof that's in the pudding is that Dionysus also had a mystery cult, and Christianity is basically one of the last surviving mystery cults from the Hellenistic period of Rome. And I did a video on this, but basically a mystery cult is a group of people that worship a god or a reinterpretation of a god from a main religion. It's an offshoot. The mystery cult of Isis did a comparison with Osiris, where the initiates baptized in the name and into the suffering of Osiris benefited from his death and resurrection. You had the same kind of thing going on with Romulus, the founder of Rome. You had the same thing going on with Dionysus. Okay, and the goddess Inanna. The mystery cults were the thing that was what's happening back then. And if you build a time machine, go back there, it was only a matter of time. You would easily make a prediction that it was only a matter of time before the Jews came along with a mystery cult, which is Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism that believes in the Messiah, even though Jesus, you're told that he fulfilled prophecies for the Messiah, but a lot of things he didn't. And one of those things is that the Jews never believed that their Messiah was supposed to, die and resurrect. Matter of fact, they believed that their Messiah was going to unify the world and bring everybody to Torah, not create a new religion. But I digress. That's a different video. Mithra, pagans nowadays and atheists will say, well, we would be praising Mithra on December 25th instead of Christ. First of all, this is a claim that was put forth in the 18th century by a critic of Christianity, a scholar that probably wasn't Christian but was criticizing, and very bad claims. He does not cite his sources, and here, in matter of fact, so technically, this is a claim that is repeated by pagans and critics of Christianity. But it's wrong, because now that we have better archaeological techniques, in proof, this is not true. Mithras was not born of a virgin, which is the common claim. Mithras maybe was born on December 25th, maybe not. This one connection, is basically probably what inspired he's a carbon copy misinformation, which, okay, a Roman emperor around in the middle of the 2nd century, close to the 3rd century, basically created Sol Invictus, which means the unconquered sun. This was celebrated on December 25th. Okay, Mithras was often associated with the sun, thus being born supposedly on December 25th. This is a slight connection, maybe, but it's not even guaranteed. And here's why. We don't have anything written by anybody who practiced Mithraism. We don't. We have some non-practitioners mentioning the mystery cult and what they might have believed, but no follower, no holy scriptures survived into modern times. What we do have is where places where they worshipped. Now, most of what we know from Mithraism comes from the Mithras, which is the place of worship. Usually they were underground with a dome on top or an arched ceiling. Okay, now this was probably because what we know about the cult Cold Hard Facts is kind of a cartoon, right? Really, you have in the front of the place where Mithra was worshipped, you have these carvings in frames, which basically might have inspired the Stations of the Cross in the Catholic Church, where basically you go into a Catholic church, you have these little pictures and they're numbered, and each picture has a number. You say the prayer at that picture and you move along and you go through the whole little area of the church until the Stations of the Cross is complete. And these pictures demonstrate different stages of the crucifixion narrative and the resurrection narrative. Here you have something similar. The very first one where Mithras is born, he's jumping out of a rock holding a knife and a torch, all right, fully grown. Well, that's clearly he's not born of a virgin per se. He's born out of a rock. But in any case, the main connection is that Mithras was a mystery cult. Christianity is a mystery cult. On the possible December 25th, but again, the Sol Invictus, the unconquerable sun, where it was believed that the sun itself was born on this, would be celebrated on December 25th. That's not proof that Mithra actually was born on the 25th, even though he was associated with the sun. What we do know is that Mithra was actually a Romanized version of a different pagan god from Persia and other parts of that area called Mithra. And Mithra is the Roman pronunciation of the god Mithra. What we do know, more than likely, that even though Mithra has been, obviously he's wearing Persian clothing, he's killing a bull, one of the most famous pictures of him, he's pulling the bull back and cutting the bull's neck and looking over his shoulder like that. First of all, from what we could tell, they did not practice animal sacrifices, that this was some kind of narrative, probably an astrological narrative. I'm not trying to get into what the archaeologists and theologians believe on this specific thing, just that there's no proof that he was born of a virgin, had 12 apostles. There's no proof that he had a star and 3 wise men, just like they claim Horus from Egypt having the same things, which obviously he didn't. But again, the mystery cult version of, say, Osiris matches the narrative, because when Osiris dies and gets resurrected, they're baptized into that belief system. Osiris's death becomes a benefit to his followers, so they could bypass the Egyptian version of what happens to you when you get pulled in front of the scales and your heart's weighed. That wouldn't happen to you. You will go straight to the other side, into the afterlife, without having to worry about the judgment, as long as you was in good standing. So, which is identical to the Christian doctrine, because that's what mystery cults believed. A mystery cult is an offshoot of a main religion. So when people say, Jesus is this, and that with this God, and they're not compatible, but at the same time, there was maybe a mystery cult attached to that where you had the same belief, where you basically have a Last Supper. That's what Mithras did. They practiced, they gathered, they always had a ritual meal, which is identical to the Eucharist ideology, where people come together and share in the bread and blood of life, or Jesus, depending on which version of Christianity you want to go with. But they had a communal meal. They were baptized. They referred to each other as brothers and sisters. And it was an initiation religion. Mystery cults are initiation religions, where you perform a ritual to become a member. Baptism, usually, communion, confirmation. These are things that are found today in most Christian churches, and definitely the Roman Christian version, and which obviously is, again, a mystery cult. So Mithras, what we know is that there's multiple stages, because on the ground you had pictures. You have pictures. You have the raven. You have the bridegroom. You have the runner of the sun. These are various steps. That was probably a form of initiation, and there was like 7 of them, if I can remember correct. But you also have 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church. Each one's a sacrament or an initiation in an ideology of that concept. One of them being marriage, the sacrament of marriage. right? That's something that you do as a Christian, unless you're a pastor, or I'm sorry, a priest. But all these claims were started in the 1800s without any basis of fact. So we have only a possible connection between the 25th of December, but there is no proof that Mithra, the Roman version of Mitra, the Persian god, had anything to do with a virgin birth or was sacrificed and resurrected. In fact, it was a bull that he was sacrificed. But again, mystery cults didn't have to do that. Matter of fact, if I lived back in Rome, I might have had a Hercules. I'm a big fan of Hercules. Maybe I would make a Hercules mystery cult to where you're baptized in the mysteries of Hercules and his suffering during the trials. You benefit from his strength. You benefit the knowledge of what he learned while he did his trials. And since he died, he killed himself and then becomes a god. I mean, that's what happens to you, right? That's how mystery cult worked. It was not part of the mainstream religion, but was inspired. It was changing ideologies. Ideologies change. And one of the things that I need to put in here is that the cult of Mithra probably was persecuted just as much, if not more, than early Christianity, because first of all, during the time that Mithras was forming, this was mainly practiced by Roman soldiers. Roman soldiers worshiping a modified Roman version of a Persian god. Roman soldiers worshiping a non-Roman god when Rome was at war with most of Persia during this time. So this was looked down upon, unpatriotic kind of like thing. So while Romans were hating on the cult of Mithra, it probably gave Christianity a nice needed break to grow faster, because Rome was focusing on one. Our soldiers worshiping a non-Roman god and worshiping a version of a god of our enemy. So understand there is a slight possible connection on December 25th, but the rest of it is completely bogus. But the other real connection that we can verify is that Christianity is a mystery cult that survived into modern times, doing basically because again, back then I did a video on this, but for the most part, there was a group of Jews that believed that there was an angel in the heavens that let Satan kill him so he could resurrect, so mankind can benefit. So early Christianity has its roots in this angelic version of a savior angel, which was later brought down to earth through a form of humorization, where basically you give a physical background. And I'll go more into this, but in the end, most of Christianity was a revelation. It was a religion based on revelations. I had visions. In order to solidify it, to make it more stronger, so nobody else can come along and say, "Hey, I had a vision." They gave Jesus a historical background. They made Jesus a possible historical character to give the claims that he made and the claims that the group that worshiped this angelic figure in the stars that let Satan kill him underneath the moon so he could resurrect. They gave this character, which was called Joshua, which is another way to say Yahshua, and which is another way to say Jesus. So Jews were already acknowledging a Jesus that lived in the stars and the constellations. And they brought those constellations of stories into the real world and gave it a historical background. There might have been a real Jesus that this was overlaid upon, but before Jesus was born, Jews were already a group of Jews who was already acknowledging a Jesus in the stars. And this was a form of mystery cult, because they would come together. They would have a last supper. They would have a supper. They would call each other as brothers and sisters. They were baptized into it so they would gain the benefit of this angel for their sins, so they wouldn't go to hell. This is identical to Christianity, except for one was in the stars, one's on the ground. But I go in more. This is a mystery cult belief system. Mithras was a mystery cult belief system. This is the main connection between Christianity and Mithras. The characteristics of the god did not overlay, from what we could tell, to Christ. Just didn't. You actually have more evidence to prove that, the early Christians borrowed stories from Dionysus because of the water turning to wine kind of stuff, and other gods. like Zalmoxis, or the goddess Inanna. The goddess Inanna. I'll do a story about her. But she was a Babylonian goddess that was crucified and went into hell. Jesus was crucified, descended into hell for 3 days, then was resurrected, where she was resurrected. And instead of having the bread of life and the blood of, or water of life, before his resurrection, they had the Last Supper, where it was the bread of life. This is my body, this is my blood. And then the Bible also talks about water of life symbolism. So there's connections there. But Mithras was not, from what we can tell, the claims, at least the claims that Mithras is a carbon copy of Jesus, are false. So I am sorry, my pagan brothers and sisters, but I'm going to have to agree with the Christians on this specific one. The historical evidence does not add up. This is a false claim. Thank you for watching. Keep Saturn in Saturnalia and the Yule and Yuletide. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. Tell me how I'm doing.